I continued the search, actually, for the right coffee table book, and what I came up with was this wonderful old book from the. I had subscribed to this periodical called Hollywood Babylon. I don't know if you remember that old periodical, but it was basically it was a gossip magazine about all the horrible things that were happening to people in Hollywood. Well, if you bought enough copies of the old magazine, then you got this coffee table book. And it was big, it was substantial, weighty, and would fit if you turned it just right. It was black and white photographs mostly, going all the way back to the 20s. Mostly it was a tell-all book about some of the, and it was a tell-all and lie book about some of the old stars and what happened to them. And I mean, it had everything in it, from Fatty Arbuckles and black and white photographs, wonderful ones, but it had Jane Mansfield's car with a little Chihuahua sitting in it, and the wig. It had that photograph in it, and the story that went along with it. It had all of Chaplin's escapades. There was one picture that struck me right from the heart side of my head. And it was a picture of Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio as they were leaving a courthouse on the day that they got their divorce. And I remember how Joe looked absolutely in control. He looked like an American hero, Joe. Walking down these stairs, and he was touching her like when men care. Sometimes they touch women when they want them to go somewhere that they don't want to go. You know how that is, how a man will take you up under the elbow here, and he'll have one hand here on this part of your arm, but one under the elbow, and he'll be guiding you down the stairs. You see it at funerals a lot. He was guiding her down the stairs of the courthouse. And he looked absolutely in control, and she looked broken, absolutely broken. And she looked tired. And she looked weary. But one part of her eye looked hopeful, because over on the left-hand side of the picture, you see, there was this young, beautiful man who was leaning up against this black car, and he looked like he might have been about 22, 23 years old, and he was cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife, and his hair had the perfect pomade front, and it just was a perfect droop. He had a black jacket on with a white starched shirt with a thin tie, and he was leaning there, and he was catching her eye. I believe that he was catching her eye. Anyway, I started working on stories for the new record a year and a half ago for the. And I remembered that shot. I remembered that, and I'd written about it in some old notes. And my deal was this: what happened to him? Maybe. What happened to that guy? I know what happened to Joe. I know what happened to Marilyn. But I was wondering, what happened to him? Do you think? And I researched as much as I could, and I found out he was a driver, limousine driver. Couldn't find out anything more about him at all. then I remembered that I was a writer. And so I went looking for him, and I found him. I found him living about 30 miles south of San Francisco. He'd moved out of Los Angeles, California. He and his sister both had moved out, living down outside of San Francisco, a little 2-room apartment. And when I walked up on him that afternoon, he was filling up plastic buckets of water and putting them in cactus, you see, because his sister had moved back to Los Angeles and found a friend. His sister had moved back to Los Angeles, and he was there keeping the cactus up for her. It's a promise. And a promise is a promise, ain't it, Eric? I said, yeah. I walked up. He said, are you the one that called? I said, yeah. You're here about Joe and Marilyn, are you? I said, yeah. He says, well, we'll talk about them, but I have some things to say to you, my young friend. I did drive them. I drove Joe and Marilyn. I drove them several years, but I want you to know that I drove anybody that was anybody in that time. I drove anybody that was anybody in that town. Remember a boy called James Dean, an Indiana farm boy. It was one of the nicest fellas